That jarring cacophony tells you that you're listening to The Power of Three, the podcast, with a little bit of bite in its interviews. When I say bite, we're not angry and aggressive, we actually go out and ask people and get them on. So we've got a bit of, attitude when we go out and try and get people to come on, and yeah. Anyway, I'm Kenny Smith, and today you are joining us as we have a look at the latest release from the Puffin Classics Doctor Who range. And today we're discussing Dracula, with an exclamation mark at the end. A bit like the Slash song Ecuador, with an extra exclamation mark at the end. But this one has a lot less music than Ecuador. Yes, this is Dracula by Paul Magrs that we're looking at, which features the first Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara, and was published in September this year. This is actually the 8th book in the series. For those of you who are counting, we've had Legends of Camelot and The Wonderful Doctor of Oz by Jacqueline Rayner. That featured the 10th Doctor in Legends of Camelot and The Wonderful Doctor of Oz, and had the 13th Doctor, which also had Missy and K9 Mark IV in it. We had The Return of Robin Hood and Josephine and the Argonauts, both written by Paul Magrs, and Robin Hood had the 4th Doctor, Sarah and Harry, while Josephine and the Argonauts had the 3rd Doctor, Jo, the Brigadier, Benton and the Master. We then had Rebellion on Treasure Island by Bally Ray, and that had Clara, River, Vastra, Jenny, Strax and the Great Intelligence. We then had Doctor Who in Wonderland, also by Paul Magrs, with the 5th Doctor, Tegan, Nyssa and Turlough. And then we had Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man by Jack Keith, with the 9th Doctor and Rose. And of course, we've actually featured The Return of Robin Hood, Josephine and the Argonauts, Rebellion on Treasure Island, Doctor Who in Wonderland, Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man, and now Dracula on the podcast. So there we go. So, what can we tell you about this new release? According to the cover blurb, a vampire is on the loose. On what they hope is going to be a holiday, the Doctor and his companions arrive in a quiet, unassuming seaside town called Whitby. The terrible significance of the place evades them, until they happen upon a theatre production that captivates their attention. Dracula! Suddenly, murders are occurring, left, right and centre, each victim with trademark puncture wounds on their neck. Ian is soon missing, and a town shrouded in myth and legend is beginning to live up to its name. So there we go. But now, BBC Audiobooks have finally done their official releases of these classics as compilation groups. And Dracula features in Doctor Who Puffin Classics Volume 2, which has got Rebellion on Treasure Island, Doctor Who in Wonderland, Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man, and indeed Dracula. So we're now going to have a 5-minute excerpt from Dracula, courtesy of BBC Audiobooks, and read by Barnaby Edwards.
Doctor Who Dracula by Paul Magrs, read by Barnaby Edwards. Chapter 1.
You know I don't like anything spooky.
Helena had told him this again and again, quite clearly. She had made it very plain to her young man. But James never listened, did he? Had he ever really taken her feelings into proper consideration? No, never. Helena stomped all the way home from the theatre, alone and utterly furious. Not that this was home, of course. She truly wished she was back in London. Things might not seem so bad there in her usual surroundings. Here in Whitby, though, everything was unfamiliar and disconcerting. A thick sea mist had drifted over the dark harbour town, clogging up the narrow cobbled lanes and making her lose her way. No, she knew she could figure out the route back to the little house at the top of the hill. She was no simpering ninny getting lost in the gloaming. Her small family had taken a cosy cottage for the autumnal week away in the north, which was definitely somewhere up this lane of shops, all their windows dim at this time of night. Only a couple of gas lamps lit her way up the slow incline towards the steps that rose to the top of the hill, but still she felt confident and determined. What a long way it was to stomp home alone in the dark. Such was the price for renting a house with a harbour view. Yes, it was stunning first thing in the morning when the sun rose over the churning North Sea, and it was equally as spectacular last thing at night when the sun's final rays shone through the craggy ruins of the ancient abbey. But it was a long way when you were in a bad temper and wearing full skirts with a corset. There were 199 stone steps to make her way up, and inwardly, Helena was cursing her papa for choosing the high-up location of their holiday let. The whole week had been a disaster. It was supposed to be a relaxing few days by the sea, but her fiancé was proving to be irksome in the extreme. He was boorish and somewhat callous, and tonight he had demonstrated that he cared little for Helena's feelings. Even though she had warned him that she disliked anything too frightening, he had insisted they both attend this evening's performance at the Opera House. It was a play he had read such good things about in the paper, and he thought they both might enjoy it. Helena had sat in the front row of this dubious entertainment, gripping the arms of her chair in terror. She was aware of James chuckling at her discomfort throughout the macabre performance. At the interval, she had trembled and was shocked when he smirked at the tears on her face. "Oh, don't be so scared, you silly girl. It's only a play. It's made up." His taunting, flippant words made her turn on her heel and march right out of the theatre foyer with no intention of returning for the next act.
I told him,
she gasped furiously to herself as she started up the stone steps.
I begged him not to take me to anything scary. He knows I don't like such things. Papa will be furious with him. All week he has been taking exception to James's brutish manners and boastful ways. He'd be only too pleased if I broke things off with him tomorrow.
Such were the thoughts churning throughout the teenage girl's mind as she ascended the damp steps, higher and higher above the cliffs of the harbour town. She was so bound up in her fretfulness that she barely noticed the splattering of icy rain and the wind that plucked at her skirts. October in Whitby could be wild and unwelcoming. Perhaps that was why the holiday cottage had been so cheap this week. And then, of course, there were these recent disappearances, if you were to believe in such things. Most likely it was just young girls running away, not murders or anything. Nothing like that, surely. By the time she reached the top of the steps and St. Mary's churchyard, she was sopping wet and sobbing with the effort of the climb. She studied the silhouette of the church, the nearby abbey, and the twinkling lights of the harbour below as she caught her breath. It was indeed a beautiful place. But she thought there was something dark and disturbing at its heart. There was an undercurrent that frightened her, and it had done so even before she accompanied James to that ridiculous theatre show this evening. A horrid darkness. Here her thoughts made her shudder. There was almost a feeling of wickedness about the place, an evil whisper in the air. "Helena," she jolted suddenly, feeling her heartbeat quicken.
Dracula is available from all good audiobook retailers as a digital download, and you can get it for £16.99. And shop around, I'm sure you'll be able to try and find some deals on it, but it is fantastic. So yes, please do purchase it and enjoy it. So now, let's find out a little bit more about the creative process that led to being released, both as an ebook and indeed in print, as well as the audiobook.
I'm Paul Magrs, and I'm the author of Doctor Who Dracula.
And I could hear that exclamation mark at the end there when you said Dracula.
Yeah, the punctuation's Very specific. It was in the writing called Doctor Who Meets Dracula. And then it was around about this time of year, last year, when I was, I think, reaching the end of the first draft. And it suddenly became Dracula! Exclamation mark.
Which is great.
It's just that touch of melodrama.
Which you need.
Yeah, bit of spikiness.
Yeah, makes it stand out as well. So
yeah.
Although it's not a musical, it does give it that sort of, it's the Oliver.
Well, because part of the story is about a quite splashy theatrical version of Dracula. That's what happens in Whitby in 1901 at the theatre in the harbour that the characters all go to at the beginning of the book. It seemed right to make it into a kind of extravaganza with an exclamation mark.
Yeah. So what do you recall about the first time you read Bram Stoker's original work?
I must have read kind of childish versions and comics. Well, I know that I read the Marvel comics, Gene Colan illustrated Dracula back when I was 4 and 5, that kind of age, and getting it delivered as a comic. And I know that I saw all the Universal films and the Hammer films when they showed them late at night on TV when I was a teenager. And I must have read kind of various filleted versions. But the actual full text of the novel, I didn't read until my first week at university. It was Freshers' Week. And I was in my room on campus and it was lashing down. And I didn't want to go to endless nights in bars. They used to put flyers and beer tokens under the door, and I had no interest. And of course, I should have been out meeting people. In the end, everybody came to my room. My room on campus was where everybody sat to drink and talk all night. But I ended up reading an awful lot of that Freshers' Week, and Bram Stoker's original Dracula was the thing that I was hooked on. And it's always stayed with me through various rereads and all the years since. And then, of course, I ended up writing the Brenda and Effie series from 2005 onwards for about 10 years and doing all those books. And Dracula plays a big part in those. And of course, it's all set in Whitby. So I've been steeped in that kind of world for a long time.
I think that there's something just like about Doctor Who that's just made, there's something about that character is just so embeds itself into popular culture, and in some ways both can be anti-heroes as well as heroes, depending on your viewpoint. I
think so, and it's interesting that they are kind of archetypal characters who step out of their original texts. That's how legends begin, isn't it? They step out of the original vehicle, mostly due to the efforts of fans. And so when Dracula, I can't remember the exact circumstances now. I read the wonderful David J. Scarl biography of Bram Stoker a couple of years ago when I interviewed him at the British Library when it came out about 9 years ago. And it's this huge compendious book on Stoker. And he talks about the kind of productions, the stage productions and the film productions, and how it grows as this industry from that initial book. And not just adaptations, it's translations as well. So facts like, I didn't realise this, I think it's the Icelandic translation of Dracula, which came out, still in the 19th century, still early. And it came out in the Scarl book that nobody realised for decades that it was a very free translation and that the person had added all these extra episodes. The translator had kind of written fan fiction about Dracula back in the 1890s, published it in Icelandic, and nobody actually realised this was going on. So I think texts that transmute across different media and into different forms through this kind of fanish excitement is what connects these figures that step outside of just being books or just being singular shows. So if you look back at Dracula, at Frankenstein or Sherlock Holmes or Robin Hood, they have promulgated across different forms, and that's what connects them, I think, and that's what makes them rich. But it's about the fact they invited their fans in over the threshold in the first place to make these things live. It's always fans and fan production.
So when the conversations were being had about which book to do next, was Dracula pretty much your first punt?
It wasn't conversations. The last few years, the very first one, when I did The Return of Robin Hood 5 years ago, that was, give us a list of what you might like to do. And I had 4 or 5 ideas then of classics combined with Doctors. And in combination with Tom at Puffin, I got down to The Fourth Doctor Meets Robin Hood. I think everyone after that was me making a suggestion, either at the end of or towards the end of drafting the first draft, or when it was delivered. I would love to do this next. I mean, as I've kept saying, this wasn't really a series of books. It began with us 2 from Jack Rayner, and they came out, and I got straight in touch saying, I've got to do this. This is exactly my thing. And I think each year they've thought of it as being complete. But every year I would say, oh, wouldn't it be great if we did some kind of Greek myths and the Third Doctor, or War of the Worlds and the Second Doctor, which was my last suggestion, which didn't get commissioned. But last year it was, I'd finished Wonderland and it was in, and I said, well, Dracula and the First Doctor's a bit of a dream idea. And so, yeah, it's been one at a time, and through my kind of pushing and my excitement, and usually something that's popped into my head in a kind of fully formed way.
What made you go with the First Doctor for this one?
Because I could see it. It's always a case of me being able to see it, and I could see this as a kind of black and white, something on Talking Pictures at a very obscure time of night, with Peter Cushing as Van Helsing and William Hartnell as the First Doctor, as the pairing at the heart of the story, and the way that they would squabble and work together eventually. And lots of guest star roles for people like Margaret Rutherford and Christopher Lee and Ingrid Pitt. They're all in there playing these characters. So I saw it very much as a kind of a very stylized, slightly camp black and white movie of the kind of mid-60s that would slot neatly into that first season of Doctor Who. So there was no danger of it ever being any other Doctor.
I think you really do get the regulars there. They're just, it's so reads like them. It's one of those ones you could read the dialogue and you could work out very easily who the characters are, and I think that's the
good
the thing when you know them inside out. And so when did you first discover the First Doctor?
Well, I became a Target reader in 79 with the release of Destiny of the Daleks, and then bought and borrowed Dalek books first, in the kind of where you are when you're about 10, where the Doctor Who books that leap off the shelf first are the ones with Daleks and dinosaurs in. So I went through all those Dalek books and anything with anything dinosaur shaped on the cover. So that was, the dinosaur invasion, all the kind of Malcolm Hulke things, because that's how you think when you're 10. And eventually you mature, into reading all the others. But I was stuck with being 10, and I read The Dalek Invasion of Earth. And then in a book exchange in Darlington, happened upon, for 5p, a copy of the Armada, very first Doctor Who novel. And so my first encounter with that First Doctor was bookish, was the way he was on the page. Followed, the next year with the repeat of An Unearthly Child on TV, which, again, like for many of my era, was a revelation. That series of repeats. So yeah, it was very different then. It's not like being able to watch any of them at the touch of a button as you can now. It felt like something kind of being disinterred from the past.
Yeah.
Not downloaded. We had to disinter these people.
Absolutely. And it's the days of going out when you want to complete your Target book set, physically having to pay to get public transport to go into wherever your
Yeah,
local bookshop
to get on
was,
the bus.
and then invest in the book. So we're investing financially and spiritually.
Yeah, and time and effort, and I think that's kind of. And when you got there, they didn't always have them. I mean, I remember W.H. Smith's in Darlington. You had to run up the stairs to make sure nobody else got there first, because they would only get 1 or 2 copies of these things, and that seemed wretched at the time. But looking back, it put such a cachet on them. You know, the excitement of I've got to get it. There's a kind of Willy Wonka golden ticket aspect to it, I guess. Any kind of scarcity puts that on. And if you've got too much of something, you stop caring. And I think in the era of there's just so much of these things and it doesn't matter, you know, not just in terms of Doctor Who stuff, but all the kind of genre stuff, there's just too much to choose from. So these things have to leap up for your attention. It's kind of not as good, I don't think. We've become greedy and complacent as consumers, I think.
Of everything, not just Doctor Who, but yeah.
I think, yeah, of everything, yeah. I think that's just true.
So tell me, have you been to Whitby? Because it certainly felt like you have.
Have I been?
A few times, I think it would be fair to say.
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, because I grew up not too far away. I grew up in Newton Aycliffe, and the nearest. It's not the nearest seaside, but it's still a fair drive away, an hour and a half or something. Our nearest seaside is actually like Seaton Carew and places like that, where you see the coast with Middlesbrough all lit up and looking just like Blade Runner. But further south of that is Whitby, and it was a destination where you took visiting relatives when you want to take them somewhere fancy. And back then, all those towns like Staithes and Robin Hood's Bay and Whitby were kind of preserved back in the 70s, that they didn't have any chain stuff, or, you know, they were more or less as they'd been as Victorian towns. And they've changed a bit in the last few decades, which is kind of a shame. They've loosened the rules. But they were very Victorian, and they had that creepiness about them. You know, as a kid, when you went to places that had Victorian stuff in them, or houses, and there was just a really creepy feel about them. Probably because of the kind of Dickensian stuff on TV, it just made you feel creepy. So Whitby always had that. In more recent years, because of doing the Brenda and Effie novels, I was there twice a year doing book events and going to stay, and we've always kind of gone there just weekends and stuff, even though it's quite a distance from Manchester. We've often had like a big Airbnb at Christmas or something with a bunch of friends, just to, you know, watch old telly and go shopping and go and see the sea and all of that. It's often been a destination. It
definitely feels vividly that you know it well. You can almost smell the air. It's that kind of, you can smell the seaside, that sort of ozony, seasidey, yeah, fish smell. Just everything. It's very much got the veracity of it all. It feels very true.
Good.
So we've got the TARDIS arriving, and there's been some murders, to be all taggart about it, and of course the play's going on. So I think it's quite nice having that. Here's the fiction, but also, and if we want to say, here's the fact as well, if we want to make Dracula real in this part, and there's that fun of that parallel going on.
Well, I mean, it plays games with which universe we're in, really, and that's been the game of the Puffin Classics the whole way along, that it would be very easy to do that series and say that we're in the universe of the Mind Robber the whole time, the land of fiction. But with each book, there's been a different reason that the Doctor's meeting people from books. And sometimes the books are real, or he's become fictional, or they're inside a legend. Or the book has dripped into the psychic circuits of the TARDIS, as it did in Wonderland. In this, I play the game of what was Bram Stoker writing about, how much of it was real or not. And as people will see, we play out all those kinds of fictional games.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be in a world in which I imagine Stoker was writing about things that had actually gone on.
I mean, I've been to Slains Castle up in the north of Scotland, which of course is what Castle Dracula is based on, with the octagonal main
Right.
hall, and it's the building is now, because they took the roof off it for tax purposes back around 1910, 1920. And the building just went to ruin. And
Yes.
so like the structure's there. So if somebody wanted to buy it, they could bring it back to life, and it'd be a great thing to do. If I won the Euro Millions and won several hundred million, that's what I'd like to do, and then make it nice.
What does it cost?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know who owns it or anything, but that would be my dream, just to bring it into real life. And
Yeah.
I know.
Can't believe nobody has.
You could make it into like almost like Dracula's second home in the UK after Whitby, sort of. But oh well.
Yeah.
So how did you find writing the interactions between the regulars and all the vampires and Van Helsing? It's just such a joy. It just bounces.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where it's a dream come true, and it's like turning on. In some ways, it's like turning on the tap, because I had a really good synopsis for this one actually. So I knew every day which scenes I was sitting down to write, and because I had this business of casting all the characters, all the secondary characters, and that they're all cast from old movies, either Hammer or Universal or Carry On or British films of the 60s. I could hear those voices immediately, and this is part of the kind of secondary expertise of people who write tie-ins. They can hear actors' voices and characters' voices, and I know what those people would be. If I've got to imagine a scene set in the dressing rooms behind the scenes of a staged Dracula in 1901, and I've cast that with Ingrid Pitt, Christopher Lee, and William Hartnell and Margaret Rutherford, I know what that scene is going to sound like.
Yeah.
And that's just all bliss. All the dialogue is my favourite bit.
It definitely comes across. I also smirked when I saw Barbara meeting Alucard. I thought, oh, Dracula AD 1972 there, Christopher Neame. Johnny Alucard being the character there.
Yeah, I mean, but also the version of Dracula in my Brenda and Effie books, who's he's very much the kind of Bela Lugosi version of Dracula. I mean, there's a number of different Draculas in this particular book of mine, as people will find out, and it means we get to do both the Bela Lugosi and the Christopher Lee versions at the same time, which is a kind of, it's the two Draculas.
Yeah, there's an idea. If we can get two Doctors, we can get two Draculas.
Yeah.
Yeah, pick your favourite ones and drop them all in. So don't want to say too much, obviously, and ruin the surprise.
No, I don't want to spoil them. Although by the time you've heard, it's always true, isn't it? You think you've heard spoilers, but by the time you read or consume whatever the thing is, you've forgotten what people told you.
True, but we'll not spoil it. It's a real shame that it's been announced that this is the final one in the range.
Well, by that they just mean they haven't commissioned any more, and there's. I mean, it's because they reached. I was doing them one a year, and then this is the 8th one, and they want to do audiobooks, so there's 2 sets of 4. It's just a fact that there's less Doctor Who publishing next year across the board, and because I've worked with both BBC Books and Puffin. That they've, in their infinite wisdom, all these people have decided that, and they used to do this back in the day, 20 years ago. If it's not on the TV, there's fewer books. The opposite, actually, of what readers want. But there's less publishing next year because there's no Doctor Who on TV. Somebody slipped and they forgot, and it's not happening, or something. Whatever the reason, there's less, and the books aren't going to fill the gap, which seems to me a big shame, really.
I agree. I think it's madness. I want more Doctor Who. If there's less on TV, then it means I've got more money to buy them. I want stories. We love stories, to paraphrase. I mean, you've mentioned that you'd like to have done Second Doctor and War of the Worlds with a particular piano.
Yes, yeah, because we love Mrs. Mills round here. We've got all the LPs, and then it was hilarious when she was mentioned as a past companion in The Devil's Chord. That was a kind of punch the air moment. And of course, I can see her in some kind of 1960s set, psychedelic London in the East End, beginning in a pub with Troughton's Doctor and Mrs. Mills, and this kind of Martian invasion of Earth happening a bit later than it does in H.G. Wells. I think it would have to be set in swinging London. But yeah, that's what I would have been writing this time of year, but They've put the kibosh on it. I don't know what will happen to Doctor Who books. I mean, it depends what happens with it. They seem to have made it all dependent on whether the series comes back and how it comes back, which seems a shame. I saw people talking online about, if there were more wilderness years, would the books come to fill the gap as an ongoing series again? And some young person saying, no, probably not, because no one is going to get rich writing Doctor Who books. As if that was the attraction. That made me laugh so much. The assumptions implicit about the reasons that people are writing for this daft series, the idea that it was making money for them is hilarious. I think personally, it would happen in fanzine form. It would happen in something. Somebody was willing to do it for the love of it, would be doing it anyway, and that will just happen, or they'll do something like it. The impulse will continue somehow, and the story will continue. It's just a shame that when it becomes something that isn't gonna, I don't know, have a wider readership.
Yeah, because I think it's a real shame that it's like no second Doctor. We haven't had a 6th, 7th, or 8th either, or even a one.
No, and I've got a list actually. I think I did it on my YouTube channel, which everybody must go and look at. I did say who I would, which Doctors I would involve in which stories for the rest of the thing, had I been in a position of doing all the rest of them. I mean, not for a second I would have assumed that I'd be getting all the commissions or even any of them. It's just my kind of desperate pushiness each year, going, I've got to do this one that got me this far. And there's no reason why they couldn't have repeated Doctors. But I did have a list, just for fun, of which books I would have been doing, and things like just for example, having the 6th Doctor in the middle of Sinbad's adventures.
Oh, that would so work. I can see that straight away. That's perfect.
Well, that when you asked before about how did you pair this one with that, it's that factor. Can you see it straight away? And will other people see it straight away?
Yeah. Just that quote and just sort of, totally can just see him in that setting and just...
I wrote a story, there's a short story somewhere that didn't come out. It was with Big Finish, and there was copyright issues to do with Beatrix Potter. But that's by the by. Within that story, there was another story about how he got his coat. And it was to do with some kind of disaster movie in space with a giant spaceship, a wreck, that he tried to, where he tried to save everyone. And the coat is made out of the scraps of everybody's clothes left behind. So it's to give a kind of tragic underpinning to the Doctor's coat of many colours, which I think it needs. It needs some kind of heft of story behind it.
Yeah.
So it would have been a chance. The Sinbad one could have explored that as well, where that patchwork comes from.
Gosh. That makes me sad that we haven't got that one, because that works.
Well, it does. But that's the nature of Doctor Who, doesn't it? I mean, you wait for the right moments for these stories that you've got in your head. I mean, I don't think when, Russell was given Doctor Who in 2003, that all those stories occurred to him overnight. That was a backlog of things he'd had in his head all of that time. You carry people who write for this series in any form, however, in whatever format, they have stories in their head ready to go.
Yeah.
So nothing's wasted. Well, no, things do get wasted, but the stories find their time.
Yeah, they'll come around eventually. So
maybe.
Talking of stories, of course, you do love to share stories on your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Give us a wee plug for that.
Well, I started watching YouTube videos about bookish things and people shopping for books during lockdown, because I couldn't get out to the shops. And I thought, I wonder if you can get, if people do videos of going around secondhand bookshops and going around places like in New York and stuff. And of course they do. And I became quite addicted to various people's channels. And it took about 4 years of just dipping into these things and kind of knowing that world before I thought, I wonder if I could just set a camera going and talk for 20 minutes non-stop about things that interest me and just upload it and get used to all the kind of system and stuff. And it turns out I could, and I quite like doing it. So that was almost 2 years ago. And I've done it I don't know, 3-4 times a week since then. And I have a membership bit to it and all sorts now, adding on all these extra bits. But it's still very lo-fi. It's still me talking to camera, no edits, no whizzy graphics or anything special. It's just me talking about books and reading and writing and my life in books. And it's just nice. It's a whole other string to my bow. And the community that I've got there, and the people who comment and the people who take part in it, some of them just had no idea of anything I ever did before. They've just come to it for what I'm doing there. And there's other people who have followed what I've done. So it's a nice meeting place. It's very steadying to have that. And it's just, me and the cat in the study having a chat. I mean, not I am chatting with the cat, but mostly chatting to the people out there.
Yeah. But the cat does need his conversation too. They all do.
He gets quite noisy, yeah.
Yeah. Unlike mine, who's snoring away there in the box on top of all my
Blu-rays. He's scratched all your Blu-rays that you'll have to buy again.
He'll moistened them as well with his wet coat.
Oh, lovely.
Thanks, Nemo. My Doctor Who, the collection, limited edition. This is.
Oh, you know them off by heart anyway, Kenny.
That's true. I don't have the Blu-ray content saved. That's the annoying thing. My Blu-ray external drive stopped working.
Oh.
Which is rather annoying. So I tried to buy a new one, and they sent me a DVD recorder. And I was like, I don't want a DVD, I want a Blu-ray.
Oh, I see.
Thanks to Jeff Bezos' people. And they said, just keep it and have a refund anyway. So I got 20 quid in my pocket and a bonus external drive. So if anybody needs an external drive, get in touch and you can have it.
I think I probably do I? What does it do?
It's just like a DVD drive that you plug into the computer.
Oh, to watch things?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Because my machine doesn't have a built-in one, so...
Oh, no, nothing has, does it? It's weird.
Yeah. Who needs physical media? Me!
Well, there's lots to talk about that. I saw a lovely discussion where people were saying, don't place all of your stuff in the hands of the billionaires, the tech billionaires. Go to shops, charity shops, and buy all the DVDs and all the CDs you can. And then other people were saying, but they degrade over 20 years sometimes, or mostly, and files do and the rest of it. And then some very smug, older person saying, well, I've got lovely vinyl records and lovely books, and I've had them 50 years, and there's no, they've just got better. And you just watch this happening in this small space of conversation, of people realizing what physical media is and what it... And, we saw it, didn't we, with the much vaunted Whoniverse. And then after a year, Terror of the Zygons goes bloop, and so does the Seeds of Doom. It just disappears. The Zygons saying, so long, suckers, and off they've popped. And, we are at the mercy of these things. They seem... it's like anything, isn't it? It's like AI and the rest of it, or CGI, where anything that seems too easy and too perfect, we know from fairy tales, we know from stories, it's not true. It's bogus. It's trying to sell you something else. If you'd read those stories, if you paid attention to those stories, you'd know that nothing's that straightforward.
Yeah.
And so, don't go for... I remember Neighbours when down the street and being round years ago, 15 years ago, and noticing that somebody's entire collection of vinyl had disappeared. And clearly it wasn't his choice, it was his wife's choice, so you watched him get defensive, which was funny. And he said, oh, but look, yes, all that wall has gone, but look what I've got in its place. And look, you've got an empty wall.
Blank and soulless.
Great, yeah, a blank wall. So I'm a great believer in physical media, in the actual things, and the like having the original K9 and Company annual, and not opening it for years and years because it had been packed away, and opening it, and there's a paper hat from a cracker that I knew came from, my big nana's Christmas dinner on Boxing Day, when I'd taken my annual with me because I wouldn't leave go of it because I loved it so much. And that paper hat is still there. The what they call in the book trade tip-ins, things that get wedged within the pages of books.
Yeah.
And that's a metaphor, isn't it, for the way that our memories and our attachments are bound up in these things. And I really don't have that attachment to things that I've streamed since streaming began, and I think I've streamed myself out with it again. It means nothing to me. I subscribed to Disney and Netflix for a number of years, both, and those series were so plentiful and so whizzy and wonderful. I watched them all continuously, and hardly any of them mean bugger all to me. Things that seemed to have such an impact at the time, it just makes them kind of transparent and weightless, and they're just gone.
They're disposable. Absolutely
disposable. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in a disposable society, and so much TV feels like that as well. It's just it's like we said earlier with the books. When you go out to buy your VHS of The Horns of Nimon, and that means something because you've gone out, you've looked for it, you've found it, you've made that effort, you've paid your money, then you come home, put it in the machine, you press play, and it's that effort.
Yeah, I mean, and things like in that current season 13 box set that's come out, and this time the extras have really meant something to me. I mean, not just that wonderful documentary about Ian Marter, which I think is a really splendid piece of work. Things like having the 60-minute edit of The Brain of Morbius that I had on VHS when I was 15 on my 15th birthday, and watched half of it before, eking out the minutes before I had to run to school. Is really, it's so nostalgic, but, testament to a time when that object was yours, it was, and the books actually counted for that as well, because when the New Adventures began, the idea that you could hold in your hands the whole of the next story, the whole of the next season when it became 4 books, because up until then everything seemed so imperiled. There wasn't anything on the TV, videotapes, there weren't so many VHS things out. The horror that you could start taping something off the telly and it wouldn't all fit on. Just stupid things like that.
Yeah, the E180 you could only fit 7 episodes on with titles. And in a Doctor Who series of 14 episodes, that's fine. But you still want your 2 4-parters together.
You'd need all the equipment to watch it as well. But the idea that the book held everything, there was nothing more to it than just this book. But that's a kind of bookish thing anyway, isn't it? That people who are bookish feel that it's the whole of the world in one book. That's well, that's like seeking solace in Dracula on your freshers week, when you feel so out of the loop with everything and away from home that you seek solace in something book shaped, and it becomes a refuge. And I guess that's what physical media really is. It's the that lovely phrase flotsam and jetsam, and we cling to it in the waters. Somebody used to say, well, why is it flotsam and jetsam are always seen together? You never just hear of just jetsam or flotsam. And it was kind of true.
They also sound like an ITV detective double act as well.
But somebody else explained that there is a distinction between flotsam and jetsam. Do you know what it is?
I would always thought flotsam, I'd assumed was something that would be on water.
Well, they're both on water. It's the debris after a shipwreck.
And jetsam would be jettisoned. So no, I don't know.
I think you're right. The flotsam is the stuff that floats away, and jetsam is the stuff they've chucked out, I believe. But when they're found, they're all found together. There's some elaborate metaphor somewhere here to do with streaming and physical media.
And we know which one we like best.
Yeah, but in the end, it's all just stuff bobbing about in the water.
Yep. Hopefully not from a flooding accident. That would just be horrendous. But we don't want to go there. No. But Paul, thank you so much once again. Really, really enjoyable as ever.
Oh, it's all right. I've got to go and do things.
Huge thanks, as ever, to the brilliant Paul. And please do give his YouTube channel a follow. It's fantastic. Not just Doctor Who, but books of all sorts. And anecdotes about going out and buying them. So, yeah, really good fun. Now, Dracula was reviewed in Doctor Who magazine issue 622 by Catherine Wheeler. And here's what her review had to say. The TARDIS lands on a cliff top. It's cold. The scent of fish and chips wafts through the air. Britain, surely. But not 1963. The Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara have landed in Whitby, the birthplace of Dracula, where a stage version of the story is playing in the Opera House 10 years after the book's publication. As a frequent flyer to Whitby myself, Paul Paul Magrs does a great job of capturing the spooky, soggy atmosphere of the place. While you definitely feel the earthy charm of the period on every page, the book is also a reminder that Victorians could be eccentric, silly and even tacky. There's a large and colourful cast of characters, including the undead, that represent humanity in all its forms. Even if you don't consume much First Doctor content, you will really be able to get your teeth into this book. The narrative shifts through the perspective of every character in the story, which really helps to humanise the inhuman antagonists. It's a slower pace of adventure that has the luxury of spreading itself out through the 200 pages or so. At certain points, I found myself flitting back and forth between the book and the internet, searching the various names and places. This was mostly because the book had piqued my curiosity about the town, but truth be told, the accuracy doesn't even matter. Without searching a thing, I'd still call this a contender for my favourite release of the year so far. Well, that's an absolute winner. Well done, Paul. You've got Catherine on side. Over in Goodreads, there's been a lot of positive reader reaction too. It's got a rating of 4.15, and of that, 5-star reviews 35%, 4-star reviews 45%, 3 stars 16%, 2 stars 2%, and 1 star 0. Hurrah! Catherine Wheeler's left a review on there as well, a 5-star review, saying smashing, really enjoyable. I don't consume much First Doctor era stuff, but this was a very good read. Hurrah! That's nice to see. Here's a 5-star review from Danny Welch. I haven't previously shown much interest in the Puffin Classic Crossovers range for the Doctor Who book line, but when they announced 2 novels based on Dracula and Frankenstein, I knew I had to give these recent novels a go. The First Doctor versus Dracula? Sign me up. Paul Magrs uses this novel as a way to make the events of Dracula actually canon to the Whoniverse is both an insane and surprisingly welcome addition. This felt like a genuine past Doctor adventure, and despite a bit of silliness and charm, it makes for a very creepy and atmospheric read filled with blood and violence. The author's portrayal of the characters was brilliant, the threat was terrifying, and I loved the little tidbits about the dark times from the First Doctor. Overall, an incredible novel that was exciting, scary, and, most of all, fun. Paul Magrs has knocked it out of the park again. 10 out of 10. 5 stars from Kieran McAndrew. Whitby 1901 and the TARDIS lands just before Halloween. Deciding to take a small break from his adventures, the Doctor soon finds himself wrapped up in an adventure with Abraham Van Helsing, who fears that vampires have returned to the town where Dracula first appeared. A fun, atmospheric story, which Magrs is littered with in-jokes and references to the wider universe of both Dracula and Doctor Who. As ever though, I question the suitability of vampires in a children's adventure. Oh, come on, Kieran. Chris Hinchley, 4 stars. Absolutely loved this gothic romp. A great atmospheric mashup of the First Doctor and Dracula. Some nice touches for Susan too. And finally, here's one from Finlay O'Riordan, 4 stars. Dracula is my favourite literary work, and Doctor Who is my favourite franchise, so I'm absolutely in love with this crossover. In many ways, in fact, this story acts as a sequel to Stoker's original novel. So there we go. Lots of positivity for it. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Dracula is now available as part of the Puffin Classics audiobook, and there are 3 other adventures in that, and courtesy of our friends at BBC Audiobooks, we've got samples of each of those. So let's start with Rebellion on Treasure Island, and that's been read by Joe Jameson.
Doctor Who, Rebellion on Treasure Island by Bally Rye, read by Joe Jameson. Chapter 1. The man knew the island was perfect. Unknown to most, uncharted, and impossible to find unless you knew it existed. There was the small matter of the rebels, of course, but they wouldn't offer any real opposition. In fact, they were most welcome. Not only a source of minds and bodies, but sitting targets who would pay for their insurgents. "We shall take care of 2 problems," the man told his master. "We shall," his master replied. "The British must feel they're being served," he added. "Otherwise there will be suspicion." "That is your domain," his master told him. "Let those buffoons believe what they choose. You serve only me. Should the British get in the way, I shall remove them. Absolutely, the man answered. I will make sure we're not discovered. Besides, the only one who can stop us is undermined.
A sorry excuse for a leader.
How many must we capture? Asked the man, to aid us in our conquest.
That is not your concern, his master said. Once I am satisfied, you will be the first to know.
And the other you spoke of?
What of him?
His master snapped. Will his presence cause us problems? His master chuckled.
No. He will not be any trouble at all.
We're anticipating another raid by the rebels, the man added. Should I prevent it?
Let them continue. The more there are, the more we shall take. They only fuel my army, give it strength beyond their imagining.
And my reward? Asked the man. The captain's treasure? When will I get that? His master chuckled again.
Please me, and you will have reward greater than mere gold and silver.
But the treasure will be mine. The man was insistent.
Yes, said his master. However, fail me, and you will pay with your soul.
Yes, master, the man replied, needles of fear prickling his skin. I will not fail you.
Then set the wheels in motion,
said his master.
Our first victory draws near.
The rebels, daubed in luminous paint in order to resemble skeletons and hidden among the jungle foliage, awaited their latest prey. 3 men sat in the trees, 2 women behind thick bushes. Almost impossible to detect, they watched as the convoy carrying recently purchased humans trundled into view. 2 carts, 3 armed British guards, 5 men in chains. It was dusk, and night was falling fast. The shadows lengthened to afford even greater camouflage.
Wait until they reach the trap,
their leader whispered. Having once escaped enslavement herself, now she rescued others. Some called her a pirate and a thief, a treasonous insurgent fit only for the gallows. Others hailed her as a freedom fighter. She answered to none of those labels. As the first British cart reached the trap, a rock was thrown from the trees, spooking the 2 mules pulling it. The animals reared and brayed and kicked out. "What the devil?" cried one of the British men.
"Calm those damned animals,"
bellowed a second. This second voice belonged to the owner of Rose House, a sugar plantation notorious for its cruelty towards those it enslaved. He jumped down from the second cart, the one carrying his latest captives, and drew his whip to lash the errant mules.
"Damn you!"
he yelled as he thrashed them. Behind him, a rebel ran from cover, cutting the second pair of mules free with a razor-sharp machete. "Rebels!" shouted one of the British guards. They began to load their muskets. "Now!" the rebel leader commanded. She knew that loading a musket and firing it took around 20 to 30 seconds. That was all the time required.
Also on this set, there's another Paul Magrs book, and this one is... Actually, let's let the narrator tell you which one it is.
Doctor Who in Wonderland by Paul Magrs. Read by Aisha Antoine. Chapter 1. The boy had been trapped on planet Earth for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it was like to voyage across outer space. He had been 11 years old when he was first dropped off in London by his people. There, he came under the care of a strange elderly solicitor. Shortly after that, he was dumped at some supposedly fancy boarding school in the countryside, which turned out to be full of dull, idiotic people he had quickly come to despise. Why were Earth people so boring? It was all filling out forms, doing exams, and playing pointless games with them. As he grew up and became a teenager, Turlough began to lose hope of ever having any fun ever again. By the time he was studying for his A-levels, he was at his wits' end. By then, he had become a skinny, acid-tongued, furious youth. He longed to rebel and cause some trouble, but how, exactly? And what was the point? He could run rings around his schoolmasters, who were a plodding ancient lot. They all carried on as if they belonged to the Victorian era, with their mortarboards and tweedy suits. This was the 1980s. Turlough had made several attempts to return to London and into the fun he imagined must be happening there, but they always dragged him back again. Then came the day that he and his hopeless friend Hippo stole the maths teacher's prized sports car and managed to escape. It gave them a brief, exciting moment of freedom. Whizzing down the country lanes at top speed, he had laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months, because he had managed to get beyond those vast, imposing school gates. But then the stupid vehicle malfunctioned and he'd ended up in a ditch. The car was a write-off. It was just as well, because it had been a rubbish old thing anyway, really. However, the most important thing about the car crash was that aside from receiving a mild concussion, Turlough had found himself in a bewilderingly strange dimension for a few moments, looking down upon the scene of the accident. There was everyone down below, fussing over the crumpled car and foolish unharmed Hippo, and here was Turlough, hovering above them all. Am I dead? He wondered silently, just as he became aware of a dark and terrible presence looming over him. It was hovering right beside him. He hardly dared look at the being who had come to haunt him. A claw-like hand was upon his shoulder, and a dreadful voice was suddenly rumbling in his ear. It was a voice that spoke to him cajolingly, telling him impossible things. A voice that belonged to a being who persuaded Turlough to make a terrible bargain. Turlough was left with nothing but a small, white, glowing crystal. It was the only proof he needed that his dark visitor was real. It was a reminder of the promise he had made. Shivering, Turlough shook himself out of his awful reverie. No, it was no use dwelling on all of that. It was an entire week later, and everything was different now. His whole life had changed, more than it had in years, and ultimately he was glad. Now he was a traveller aboard the TARDIS. He was a crew member aboard a mysterious kind of time machine. It was an amazingly advanced craft that was much larger on the inside than the outside. This was unbelievably exciting, and he was doing everything he could to contain his glee and maintain an aloof and slightly superior attitude. But he had actually escaped. He had made a bargain and come through several awful ordeals, and now here he was aboard this amazing vessel. All of time and space were his to explore. There were, of course, a number of drawbacks and irritations, as there often were in his life. First of all, and he didn't want to dwell on it, there was the constant threat from the being whom he had first encountered in that weird dimension after the slight accident in the maths teacher's car. But he wasn't thinking about that just now. No, he could put all of that out of his mind. He was even trying to convince himself that it had all been just a bizarre dream. The other complications in his immediate future had to do with his 3 travelling companions aboard the TARDIS.
And finally, completing the set, is Frankenstein and the Patchwork Man by Jack Keith. And this one is also read by Aisha and Twan.
The Headless Statue. Travelling with the Doctor, Rose had learned that space wasn't actually that dark. It surprised her every time, the way being outside the Earth's atmosphere clarified everything, turning the sky into a rich velvet strewn with millions of sparkling diamonds. It was possible to sit in the open doorway of the TARDIS as it floated through the void and read a book by starlight alone. But midnight in the 19th century, in a house with a monster after the power had just gone out, that was dark. Rose opened her eyes wider and wider until it hurt, but she still couldn't even see her own feet. "Doctor," she whispered. "I'm here," he said from somewhere to her right. She reached for his hand and found it. A moment later, his sonic buzzed and the kitchen filled with the familiar blue glow. Rose was very glad they'd gone back to retrieve it, otherwise they'd be fumbling around in the dark searching for candles. Rose quickly let go of his hand, a little embarrassed. "I was worried the negative energy had killed it," she whispered. "No." The doctor tapped the side of the sonic. "It has a fail-safe. If anything tries to drain it, the whole thing locks down, trapping the charge inside." Rose was about to ask another question when she noticed something. There had been 5 people in the room when the lights went out. Now, only 4 remained. She looked around. "Where's Vincent?" "Dr. Frankenstein?" Janine called. For a moment, there was no response. Then a tremendous crash echoed through the house. And then a scraping sound, like claws against the inside of a coffin. "Stay close to me," the doctor said. Rather than going to the exit, he headed for the sitting room, moving towards the danger as usual. "I don't like this," grumbled the coachman. "Well, that just means you're still sane," Rose said. As they crept through the sitting room, every shadow looked menacing. Even for such a large creature, there seemed to be endless hiding places, standing inside the thick velvet curtains, crouched behind the chaise longue, lurking around every doorway. A voice filtered down from upstairs. "Father?" It was Vincent. When the lights went out, he must have persisted in his mission to find his dad. He knew the house well enough to move around in the dark. "We need to talk to the creature," the doctor said. "Give it a chance to—" He trailed off as they entered the foyer. In the cold light of the sonic, Rose saw that the statue of Prometheus had been beheaded, and the chandelier wrenched off its chain, crystals scattered everywhere. One of them had been used to gouge a message in the wall. "You will die alone." "I don't think talking can fix this," Rose hissed. "Father!" Vincent shouted from upstairs. "Where are you?" The doctor hurried up the stairs and Rose followed. "It didn't hurt the housekeeper," he said. "In her description, the creature sounded conflicted, don't you think? It sounded crazy. Can we, trap it somehow?" They turned right, towards Frankenstein Sr.'s bedroom. The door was open. Rose could hear Vincent rummaging around in the darkness beyond. Rose turned to the coachman. "Are there enough horses for all of us?" "There's a carriage," he grunted. "Room for 6. As they entered the old man's room, the lights all came back on at once. And Rose saw they would only need space for 5.
So there we go, not a bad selection at all. And as I said earlier, it's available now from BBC Audiobooks and in all the usual places where you can buy them from. Remember, you can follow us on social media. We're at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter. We have a Blue Sky feed at Finished Zine. And don't forget, we also have a Facebook group as well. And if you have enjoyed the podcast, please do feel free to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts from. Now it's time to go. And as ever, we're going to finish with a tune. And given that there's vampires involved in this one, I think we'll go with somebody Scottish. It's going to be Annie Lennox with Love Song for a Vampire. We'll be back very soon. Cheers, everyone. And remember, please don't have nightmares.